Good morning, Broncos country. It is Legends of Mile High, and I'm Thomas Hall, your host. So, welcome to the show, and thank you for being here. We are going to talk about the Hall of Fame. Let's talk some positivity today, right? Broncos are losing, unfortunately, and it's a lot of negative going on out there, but the Hall of Fame is a positive thing for the most part. I mean, sometimes the Broncos Broncos fans can get down on the lack of Broncos in the Hall of Fame, but there's 16 people who have at least put on the orange and blue who are nominated for the Hall of Fame, and we're going to talk about that. But before I do, and before people get down on the Broncos or the lack thereof being in the Hall of Fame, I just want to remind you that since 2004, 9 Broncos, not real Broncos. I'm not talking about players who have come to the team, but 9 real Broncos, so to speak, have made it into the Hall of Fame, and 5 are going to be in there over the 7 years. Now that Gradishar is most likely going to be voted in, so that's a great development, right? So think about that. Think about how, I mean, that really is, if you look at the last 20 years, it's almost 1 every other year, and then 5 in the last 7. That's pretty darn good. So it's kind of hard to get down on the Pro Football Hall of Fame selectors for not putting Broncos in the Hall of Fame, because they have. And you can also talk about, players like Peyton Manning and John Lynch, and then those that played for a little bit longer than a one and done are also in the Hall of Fame. So it's a pretty nice to see that. Now you can talk about the past, right? There is a past history of Broncos being overlooked, and that's unfortunate. So for a team that went to 6 Super Bowls in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, the first player to be inducted into the Hall of Fame was John Elway in 2004. So there is some issue with that backlog. I'll definitely agree to that. The Broncos were overlooked for a long time, and now you've got players like Carl Mecklenburg, Louis Wright, Upchurch, Odoms, who actually have a real legitimate shot at being in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, but have been ignored and are now in this massive backlog of senior candidates. So there is that. And then if you also talk about teams that went to back-to-back Super Bowls back then or around that same time, there are a lot more of those players in the Hall of Fame than the Broncos had. Now, the Cowboys went in 70 71, and they lost one and they won one. So I can understand why there's more Cowboys in the Hall of Fame, because they actually won it, and they were pretty dominant back then. But the Broncos were pretty dominant too, going to 3 Super Bowls in a 4-year span. So the Broncos have a legitimate gripe there, and the Cowboys have 5 times the amount of Hall of Famers from that team that went to back-to-back Super Bowls than the Broncos do in 86 and 87. The Vikings, they went to 4, lost all 4, but they went to back-to-back ones, and then 4 within a short time frame, so to speak. They've got 8 in, so that's 4 times. And then the Bills, who went to 4 straight, have 6 in. So there's some legitimate gripes when it comes to Broncos not being in the Hall of Fame, but it has to do with the past, not the present, for sure. So let's say hello to some of the folks in the chat this morning. Jeremy, Sean, good morning, Jeremy. Thank you for being here. Appreciate you coming in, being here almost every morning. It's wonderful. Thank you so much. Again, I'll just remind you that I'm here trying to run everything by myself. So, if I miss a comment or if I miss a Facebook stars or something like that, just, I apologize up front. Jeremy has a good question here. It says, morning, Thomas, Hall of Fame question for you. Do you think Russ gets in? Russell Wilson, yes, I do believe he gets in. He was on a Hall of Fame trajectory before he came to the Broncos. He had a down year. If you look at his stats adjusted for era, he's right there with the many that have gotten into the Hall of Fame. He's not one of those kind of slam dunks, like absolutely he's in the Hall of Fame, but yeah, he gets in. He has a couple other things. He's got the Super Bowl win, been to 2 Super Bowls. He also has, the distinction of being a dual threat quarterback, one of the very successful dual threat quarterbacks, so to speak. And I think, last year people are wondering, can he get in now because of the down year? Well, he's having a better year this year. I think he kind of makes up for that down year over the next few years, builds his case, and I think he gets in. Maybe not first ballot, but shortly thereafter, I think he does. So thank you for that, Jeremy. Appreciate it. Before I grab a few more comments, I just want to remind the folks in the chat and anybody who comes in to listen later, meet and greet with Mile High Huddle podcasters is going to be October 22nd, Green Bay Packers game. Come out, meet us, the big Mile High tent. You'll see it out there in the parking lot, tailgating. It's going to be a fun time, so don't forget to come check it out. And say good morning to Dominic. Dom, thank you for coming in. Good morning. He's Thomas in Broncos country. Thank you for that. Appreciate you being here. And Isaiah Stacks, good morning, Broncos country and Thomas. Well, good morning to you. Appreciate you being here. It's bright and early for me, at least, and hopefully some people have been up for a while, and it's not super bright and early, but thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Albert Knopper's coming in saying, good morning, Thomas and Broncos fan. It's nice to see you in chat this morning, Albert. We're going to talk some positivity. We're going to talk Hall of Fame. We're going to talk about whether or not any of these 16 former Broncos, so to speak, get in. We're going to talk about if they should and those that really shouldn't. And then we've got Keith Brugman, my man, coming in. Good to see you, Keith. Very good morning to you, Thomas. He says, thank you, Keith, for that. I appreciate it. As always, it's great to see you. And, don't forget to check out Albert and Keith both have podcasts. Check it out and, give them some support. The great Broncos fans, great, they're good to listen to talking about Broncos football. So check it out. And then we got Diego Alonso. Morning, Thomas. What's your prediction for Sunday's game? Well, I don't want to get into that, but we will do a prediction. I have another show on Saturday, Orange and Blue View with Ron White. Great, fun show. We are going to do all our predictions. We'll do the pregame, and I'm going to remind you that those have been very accurate. The stuff we've dug into and brought up, talked about in those shows have come to pass in the game for the most part. So check it out. I'll give my prediction then, or you can go get my prediction now with the Mile High Round Table, which is probably going to come out today. We all have to give our prediction. But I guess I'll spoil it. I think the Broncos are going to lose. It's tough to play in Miami. It's one of those things where I just really can't, without putting my fan hat on and my orange glasses and say they're going to win. I just can't do it. So, unfortunately, I just think that the Miami offense is going to be too much for the Broncos defense, but you never know any given Sunday for sure. And then we got Clayton coming in. Good morning, Clayton. Really appreciate you being here as always. And Clayton says, morning, guys. Smash that like button and share. Let's go. Let's get that dub 32-21. And yes, their show is great. Love it. Well, thank you for that shout out for our show on Saturday night. Really, that's awesome. I'm glad you like it. I like doing it now. It was a little bit tough, doing the Saturday nights, through the summer and everything. But I really wanted to wait till now so that we could be that show that does the pregame. We're the last show before the Broncos game. And really it's a morning game. So we're that. And we really dig into the data and the film, and we really try to bring you something different. So thank you for that. Appreciate it. Just like this show, it's something different. We talk history a little bit. So I enjoy it. I enjoy both of them. Miguel, thank you for coming in. Good morning, sir. Do you think there should be a limit on Hall of Famers? I feel like if your resume says it, you should. I don't think there should be a limit, Miguel. I am a believer of not more players in the Hall of Fame, the right players in the Hall of Fame. I think that I don't want to take anything away from the Hall of Fame players. There's a lot of great players out there. The Pro Football Hall of Fame is an exclusive club, more exclusive than the other pro sports in my mind. But I think they've gotten it wrong a few times. And I'll be the first to admit that I can't stand that Pittsburgh has so many players in the Hall of Fame, but LC Greenwood is a big snub. He should have been in a long time ago. Yet they're getting it wrong with him. He's in the senior pool now. So I mean, I'll freely admit that other, even the Steelers have gotten snubs. So I think it's the right players, not more players. So there shouldn't be a limit. If you deserve it, you deserve it. And it doesn't matter if you're first ballot or not. I mean, if you get in, you're in that exclusive club. So I have I'm a Hall of Fame advocate. I want more Broncos in there that deserve it. And I'll talk about some of these that I think deserve it who won't get in, but a limit, no. But I really would like the selectors to stop looking at stats so much and look at these other positions that don't have stats that they can, easily get in. So like my friend Jack Silverstone, who was on the show a while back, probably a year ago, brought up a great point. He said, if you want to find the last 5 Hall of Famers at the wide receiver position, you only have to go back to Marvin Harrison. If you want to find the last 5 centers who've been inducted into the Hall of Fame, you have to go all the way back to Jim Langier. That is a long stretch. So I want them to stop looking at career stats, the Fred Taylors of the world, and start looking at guards and centers, people that deserve it, who've been playing, have been ignored for a long time, but were the top of their game. So that I'd like it changed, but no limit. All right, here we go. Keith's coming with a question. Thomas, which Hall of Fame nominee would you choose to add to the roster when in their prime? Who would help us the most? That's a good question. Well, Jason Elam comes to mind right away because the Broncos have had such trouble with their kicking game, right? I mean, they really just have and I want to say the offensive linemen, right? Like the offensive line struggling, but the interior offensive line really isn't struggling too bad. So, I mean, I would go with Elam, or I would say Al Wilson, right? He's a nominee, a great middle linebacker who you would probably help this team on defense quite well. But yeah, those are 2 that come to mind for this team. The defense is kind of a mess, and there's really not a lot that you could do to really fix it right now. So, but yeah, I'm going with Elam because he was automatic. All right, so let's talk about the 16 players who are in the nominee list, right? And sorry, I didn't check. Thank you for the support, Miguel, with the Facebook stars. Very much appreciate it. So we've got a bunch of players who just kind of played for the Broncos. They weren't really Broncos, so to speak. And you got Lee Woodall, who played in 2001 for the Broncos. You got Jamal Williams, was a ex San Diego Charger, came in 2010, played for 1 season. Simeon Rice, 2007. Dre Bly, Keith Brooking, Ted Washington played for 1 season in 1994. And you got Jamal Charles, who came around in 2017. Those are all players who really aren't Broncos. They played for a very short time, but all their career was spent elsewhere doing other things. And frankly, I don't think any of them, well, all of those names that I just said, besides Simeon Rice, are not Hall of Famers in my book. I don't think they've done enough. I know they've been nominated, but there's a lot of, you can nominate it as a fan. So, if you have a favorite player or whatever, you can throw it out there and nominate them. So they're on the list. I don't think they're Hall of Famers in my mind. I think Simeon Rice is borderline Hall of Famer, though. I think, if the big question is, kind of between him and Neil Smith, who's the better player? Well, they both have championships. Simeon Rice has more sacks. So I think if Neil Smith is going to get in, I think Simeon Rice should be in the conversation for sure. But as a Bronco, he really wasn't. I wouldn't consider him a Bronco at all. He's Tampa Bay Buck for the most part. That's where he won his championship. And then you've got another one on the list who was from back in the olden days, so to speak, but not that old. Glenn Milburn, heck of a returner, great all-purpose guy. Man, I think he still has the record for the most all-purpose yards, over 400 in a game. He had an incredible season with the Broncos, all-purpose yards. He's one of those players that you definitely like. You think he has a case, but when you talk about it a little bit more and you think about it a little bit more, what was it that he did that was this as other than a special teamer. And that's the problem is special teamers have a hard time getting in. But if you take away the special teams and you think about him from that light, there's not much there. But he does have a lot of kick return stats. And so you got to talk about him a little bit. But from my mind, he's not going to get in the Hall of Fame. He's one of those that's just his qualifications just aren't quite there. When you talk about, kick returning, you don't have Rick Upchurch in, you don't have Billy White Shoes Johnson, some of these others like Brian Mitchell, they're still waiting. So it's kind of tough to put Glenn Milburn in above them for sure. Now there's really 7 players in my mind who are Broncos, like full Broncos, that you can consider. Well, Neil Smith isn't one of them, but he was there. He helped out in that first championship quite a bit. It's Tom Nalen, Rod Smith, Jason Elam, Mark Schlereth, Neil Smith, Al Wilson, and wide receiver Brandon Marshall. Now, I would rank them in that order, actually, right? I would rank them in that order going down the list. Tom Nalen, as you know, is my number one guy. He's a center who's been overlooked, should be considered for the Hall of Fame, but is completely forgotten. And I'm doing a video series on Twitter, on TikTok, talking about all his qualifications. So go check that out. I'm going to be trying to do one a day if I can until the semifinals are announced. And that's a lot, but if I can fill up at least most of that space, that's a lot of qualifications and people should take notice. So he's my number one candidate. I actually think he eventually gets in. So if I'm going to pick somebody that gets into the Hall of Fame, Tom Nalen eventually gets in. I think people will start to reconsider his candidacy over time. All right, Facebook user coming in. I'm sorry, I don't know who you are, Facebook user, but thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate it. It says, good morning, Thomas. Just a question. I know it's only 2 games, but do you believe VJ is one or done, or does he make it to year 2 with Peyton? No, I don't. If he continues to play the way he is, no, or coach the way he does, no, he's not going to make it to year 2. And I think it was Jeremy that actually said that if they fire Dennis Allen with the Saints, he's going to be the next coordinator. But yeah, the way VJ has been coaching, I don't think he makes it another year unless he's got to have to turn it around. I mean, obviously it's 2 games in, so it's hard to say that now, but if it continues, no, absolutely not. Okay, Chris Jenkins coming in. What Orange Crush era player besides Randy Gradishar should also make the Hall of Fame? Well, the first one that comes to my mind on the Orange Crush is Louis Wright, second best player on that team by far. The original shutdown cornerback, right? The teams shied away from him. And he's the only cornerback that was a 1970s all-decade player who's not in the Hall of Fame. All the other cornerbacks that are on that all-decade team are in the Hall of Fame. So in the 1970s, they were saying he was one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL for the 1970s, yet he's outside looking in. And that's because they keep pointing to his interception stats. And unfortunately, that's going to haunt him for a while. But there's a reason for it. Dan Fouts even said it. They did not throw at him. So there's that one piece. They didn't throw him. But when he had a competent cornerback on the other side of him, he actually did have pretty good interception totals. In fact, 6 when Mike Harden was the other cornerback, he had 6 in one season. So you've got to take other things into account. You can't just say, oh, he didn't have interception totals. He was a great player. Louis Wright should be in the Hall of Fame already. Randy Gradishar should have been in there much longer ago. But those are the 2 Orange Crush players. Now, and that's defensive, right? That's a defensive thing. So that's what I'm thinking about. But from that team, Riley Odoms actually should be in the Hall of Fame if you look at Charlie Sanders being in the Hall of Fame. Riley Odoms has a better resume than Charlie Sanders. They played about the same time and everything. Even when they were playing at the same time together, Riley Odoms was better statistics-wise. He should be in the Hall of Fame if Charlie Sanders is in there. So there's 2 players right away that you can make a case for, and they should be in. So thank you for that, Chris. Really appreciate it. And we're getting a question on Rex Ryan. Thoughts on Rex Ryan? Well, I think he's right. I think what he said was correct. about Vance Joseph. We've been saying it too. I did not want him hired. I didn't want Vance Joseph hired. Would Rex Ryan do any better? Probably. My feeling is, why didn't Sean Payton go find somebody young, up and comer defensive coordinator? Why bring back the guy who failed miserably as a head coach in Denver and then make him the defensive coordinator? It was, if he had to do really well for fans not to dislike him, and he hasn't done it so far. So why bring him in? It was my first question. Like, what the heck, I don't know, but yeah, I would have taken Rex Ryan, but give somebody else a shot who's an up and comer who has a chance to kind of grow and then become another head coach down the road. So that's my thoughts. Roy Osborne, I love your hat, he says. Thomas, looks cool on you. Well, thank you. I was wearing it out at training camp, and people were liking it, so I said, should I wear it on the show? And the overwhelming verdict on that was yes. So I'm wearing it on the show all the time. So appreciate. And I love the hat, and I'm kind of a cowboy, so it kind of fits. So thank you very much. And Jeremy's coming back in saying, yeah, that was his prediction. I talked about Dennis Allen actually getting hired. So if he gets fired, you might see Dennis Allen taking the defensive coordinator position. So thanks for that, Jeremy. Thanks for the reminder. Appreciate it. All right. Keith is coming in to say, we're going back to the Hall of Fame. All right. Question, Thomas. Why Tom Nalen over Mark Schlereth? I was a stink fan from back in the day. Look, I love Mark Schlereth. I think he's on two iconic offensive lines, the Hogs in Washington and then the Orange Hush in Denver. He helped make that Denver offensive line formidable, one of the best offensive lines in history. If you look at the 1997 offensive line, most people will rank that offensive line in all the Super Bowl offensive lines as one of the top. So I think Mark Schlereth has a case. He got three Super Bowl rings for sure. I love Schlereth. The reason why I take Tom Nalen over Mark Schlereth is because if you look at Tom Nalen's career, you look at what transpired when there was no other great offensive lineman on that line, when they didn't have Terrell Davis as their running back. Look at what Tom Nalen did during that time, right? Mark Schlereth had great players around him during his career. I mean, two offensive lines that are iconic, through the history. Tom Nalen did it with nobodies around him. Later in his career, did it with nobody's really around him on the line. He made the line better. He made the running backs better. He was the mainstay through that whole zone blocking scheme. And if you look at those times before and after, the no 1,000-yard rushes before, then when he got hurt and was done in 2007. In fact, Travis Henry was on pace to get over 1,000 yards. Tom Nalen got hurt. He went from 99 yards per game down to 27 yards per game, and then they started replacing him with Selvin Young. So the amount of production that happened under Tom Nalen's watch for the entire time is why I put him ahead of Mark Schlereth. But also, he was the first one to do it, and only one of two to have 10 1,000-yard rushers and 1 2,000-yard rushers as a center in his career. And this is back when the centers made the line calls. They were the leaders of the line, and Tom Nalen did that. Kevin Mawae is the other one, and Kevin Mawae did it with Curtis Martin and Chris Johnson, and only 1 year with Lendell White, which you could say, Lendell White, that was quite impressive. Tom Nalen did it for Olandis Gary, Reuben Drones, Tatum Bell, those names. So that's why Tom Nalen, to me, has more of a qualifications than Mark Schlereth. And I like Stink, man. I'm a fan of his today. I love listening to him and everything else. But Tom Nalen just has a better resume. All pros. Just if you look at it across the board, he has a much better resume, and that's why I think that way. So thanks, Keith, for that question. Dom's coming in. We're really getting into this. All right. I thought I was going to have to go all down the entire list and talk about everybody, but we're bringing up other names. This is great. Dennis Smith, Hall of Famer or not, really? Dom's asking, what about Dennis Smith, Thomas? Dennis Smith, many people say he was the best safety in Denver Broncos history, even over Steve Atwater. I don't really buy into. I think he was more athletic and could have been better. I think he has a Hall of Fame case. I don't think he gets in. And the reason why I don't think he gets in is when you watch that Super Bowl against the 49ers, Dennis Smith is in many of those pictures, running behind that high scoring offense where they just got completely routed. And this was the number one defense in the league that year, and they just got completely routed. And I think that's mostly why he doesn't get in. But he has a case, and I made the case. So I did a countdown of snubs to the Hall of Fame, a series of articles on Mile High Huddle. Go check it out. It's it's kind of hard to find because they've been spaced out. But the only one that's missing is which should come out soon because Tom Nalen was put as a nominee. So we're going to probably publish that soon. Tom Nalen's the only one missing. So I did 15-1, and Dennis Smith's on it. There's a case for him, but I just don't think he ever gets in. We got David Bishop coming in saying, "Morning, Thomas, from a Broncos fan of nearly 40 years. Man, that's a long time. That's me too. Been around for a long time. I sure appreciate this show," he says, "for taking us back to happier days." Yeah, I love to talk about the history and keeping it alive. I talk about current events on the show most of the time, but I tell the Mile High Legend story and I talk about history, and it really is to keep the newer fans keep that knowledge continuing, because it just dies away, right? And so I appreciate that, David. Thank you for saying that. I really do. And I'm going to give a shout out to Kevin Gray here saying, "My daughter makes custom cups. She made me one with the Broncos new helmet on crimson and orange background." Really, that's awesome. That's really cool. I don't know if she sells them or not. If she does, let the people know. That's really, really, really cool. And I usually have a Broncos cup, but for my coffee, I don't. This morning have this cup, but yeah, those are fun. So thank you, Kevin, for coming in and saying that. And Jeremy's saying it's weird that guys get penalized for losing Super Bowls, but not for making Super Bowls. Yeah, and that's my point earlier in the show, where the Broncos were in back-to-back Super Bowls and 3 in a 4-year time span. There's 3 players from those teams that are in the Hall of Fame. Yet you've got Bills who lost 4 and they've got 6. You've got the Vikings who lost 4 and they've got 8, right? So, and I'm not talking players, these are, coaches and everything. So it's one of those things where it's a head scratcher, but yeah, they do get penalized for losing it, but to make it to the Super Bowl is an incredible feat, really. I mean, you think about, there's teams that have never been to the Super Bowl, right? Teams that have never played in a Super Bowl. And then there's teams that have played in it and lost, and have never won. Yet people are like, "Oh, losing a Super Bowl, that should penalize you." It shouldn't. It's quite a feat. And to think about, that the 80s team that went, Carl Mecklenburg, somebody who should be, in the Hall of Fame. He has all of the stats you can think of. He has all of the, he has plenty of awards, and he has that distinction, that remarkableness of being the only player to play all front 7 positions, even in the same game. Yet they're just, they don't, for some reason, they don't appreciate that. And that's a huge deal. One of the only player to do it, really, at least the only player to do it at that high of a level. And you're never going to see that again. So it's, I don't know. It's a head scratcher to me. Keith's coming back in. "If you could change a rule or 2 regarding the Hall of Fame, what would it be?" Yeah, I would. The biggest one is I would expand the senior class to 5 over the next 5 years. There's a huge backlog of seniors. Expand it to 5 for 5 years. Get some folks in there, and then go back to 2, right? And just do 2 for the rest of the time. I don't want. Again, I'm not one of those that say you need to have more players in there, but you kind of do, right? These players that deserve it. You need to have more deserving players in. And there's a lot of players from pre-60s that have just been forgotten. There's a lot of 60s, 70s, and 80s players now that are in the backlog. Open that up, get 25 of those seniors in, and then you're getting into those players that that you have to have a conversation about. So that would be the one I change. Yeah, and Gabe's coming in with Dennis Smith and Ronnie Lott played together at USC. What a safety duo! Total devastation. Yeah, they were they were incredible, and people will say that Dennis Smith was the better player athletically. So great high jumper and everything else, but Lott, it's hard to argue with those Super Bowl wins of the 49ers for sure. And so continuing on here just a little bit, and then I'm going to have to end the show. Rod Smith, fan favorite. I think he has a case for the Hall of Fame. The problem is, and I actually think he belongs in the Hall of Fame. Problem is as he continues to get pushed down that career stats list because of the explosion of the passing offense over time, his credentials, his chances of getting in just keep getting less and less. And that's the problem, right? If the voters want to look at the top receivers, he's going to be way down the list because there's just so many more that just keep accruing stats and pushing him down. And so I don't think he gets in. If he does it, maybe it's as a senior candidate, but I don't think he gets in as a modern candidate. And if Hines Ward gets in before Rod Smith, I actually think you should just scoop that whole place up with a bulldozer and throw it in the dumpster, because that's a slap in the face. Hines Ward was never the best receiver in the league once during his career. You can make the case that Rod Smith was for 2 years when there was incredible competition for that title. That's going to bother me for a long time. So Rod Smith should be probably never getting in. Jason Elam, another one who has a case. I don't think he ever gets in, unfortunately. So it's a bummer. They just don't put special teamers in, especially kickers. It takes a long time for anybody to get in. I mean, Devin Hester, special teams player, the greatest returner of all time by far, and he's still waiting to get in. And when you're the best of the best at something, you should be in the Hall of Fame, and he's still made to wait. So special teamers have a hard time getting in. Mark Schlereth has a case, probably not going to get in, unfortunately, but like we said, there's a reason for Schlereth getting in there. And then you've got Al Wilson, great career, but too short, but not great enough. So short careers have to be extremely good, right? They have to be, Terrell Davis, extremely great career. Baselli, a great career, short. Kenny Easley, another one. I just don't think Al Wilson has enough hardware or no championships, not enough for a short career to get into the Hall of Fame. And if he had played, another 5 or 6 years, maybe we're talking about him getting in. He has qualifications, but the problem is a short career wasn't great enough. Now, Brandon Marshall, wide receiver. This is a fun one. I think he's a borderline candidate, right? He was a great wide receiver. I think the problem is people don't like his antics, and they're going to just kind of ignore him for a while and then, again, as these stats accumulate, push him down the list, he'll get forgotten about and never get him. But if you go back and you have an objective mind and you look at what Brandon Marshall did as a wide receiver, he was one of the best wide receivers in the game of football for a long period of time. It's going to be one of those things where, people are going to go back and look at his career and be like, whoa, why isn't this guy in the Hall of Fame? And he's just not going to get in. And then finally, Neil Smith, right? Came to the Broncos for a couple of years, 97, 98, 99. Very impactful in that 1997 run to the Super Bowl. Not going to, I think he was impactful then, not impactful in 98 and 99 at all, in my opinion. In fact, I think if I remember correctly, he wasn't even the starter for a lot of the games in 1998. So I think he has a borderline case. I know that there's a lot of people that are pretty high on him, think he should be in the Hall of Fame. I just, if you're looking at pass rushers from that same era, there's others that you could, Simeon Rice for one, Leslie O'Neal actually is more deserving. So I think Neil Smith is probably going to get in, but I think he isn't as deserving as some of the others. So Neil Smith, yeah, I mean, a Bronco kind of, but not really. And we have Brian Dunn saying, "Good morning, everyone. I'm coming in late. Riley Odoms belongs in the Hall of Fame. Compare him to his contemporaries from the 70s. His numbers are better than most tight ends inducted. He was an awesome player." I did hit on Riley Odoms. Brian, thank you for being here. I appreciate the comment. He is. I mean, Charlie Sanders got in. Riley Odoms has a better resume than Charlie Sanders. So if you're going to put Charlie Sanders in, why is Riley Odoms just not even talked about? But you can also look at, compare what he did to, there's only a few that are better, but not by a long shot. Mike Ditka's stats are a little bit better. Jackie Smith, there's a few that are better, but if you look at the time he retired for tight ends, he is in the top 5 for most of those career passing stats for tight ends. So touchdowns, yards, receptions. He has a very solid case, and he was a great blocker too. So, and he was doing this when, tight ends weren't featured as passers, right? They were more of an extra lineman. If Riley Odoms played today, he would be a Hall of Famer, no doubt. The guy was incredible for his era, and he's forgotten about. But go look at Charlie Sanders' stats, awards, and everything else, and compare them to Riley Odoms. And I think that would change. If you're in doubt about Riley Odoms, that should change your mind. Charlie Sanders is in. Riley Odoms has never even gotten a sniff to the Hall of Fame. That is a travesty. And Jeremy Sean's coming in with a philosophical debate, and I always kind of go back and forth on this too. So he says, I think if you play an integral part in a championship, you can claim that player as a Bronco. Same with DeMarcus Ware. Yeah, I kind of had this. I said you had to play at least 35% of your career with the Broncos to become a Bronco, but it's one of those things where you can celebrate it if you want, and if you don't, you can say that. I mean, DeMarcus Ware, he was impactful not just in the championship, but impactful for Von Miller, which actually ended up bringing that championship. So there's a lot of reasons why you could say DeMarcus Ware, you could say Peyton Manning, you could say John Lynch. They're definitely the integral parts of the team at the time, but it's hard to discern. But you can celebrate those. I mean, those are Broncos. They don't go into the Hall of Fame as a member of any team, really. They're in the Hall of Fame, and they played for XYZ team. So that's one of those things where you just gotta, you can look at it however you want. If you want them to be Broncos, then they can be Broncos. And I know Peyton Manning is loved in Denver, and he loves Denver, so helped turn that franchise into a winner, and so you can say that. But yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting debate, but then you can also look at, players. You can't include Tony Dorsett or, the cornerback there from the Patriots. Now just drawing a blank. I'm sorry. Whatever his name is, you can't. Yeah, it's hard to include those guys as Broncos. So, and we got Brian Dunn coming back in, talking about Tom Jackson and Louis Wright. I talked about Louis Wright to begin with. So there's some good players on that 70s team that should be in the Hall of Fame. There's also great players from the 60s that in the AFL days that also have a case. Goose Gonsolin, for one, he and Lionel Taylor both have cases, but that's the thing about the AFL. There's only one player who played the entirety of the career in the AFL who's in the Hall of Fame. So they kind of pushed the AFL away. But that's the problem with it. They think it was an inferior competition. Well, Joe Namath's in the Hall of Fame for proving that wrong. He came in and, guaranteed victory in Super Bowl III, then went out and backed it up and brought legitimacy to the AFL. Before that, they're like, oh, the AFL is not as good. But that's not true, because Joe Namath showed them that they were, and and got into the Hall of Fame because of it, really. I mean, he had other stats. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to diminish his legitimacy for the Hall of Fame, but that is a huge thing that he did for the AFL. So, I just don't see Gonsolin getting in. I don't see Lionel Taylor getting in, but they have case. And look at Lionel Taylor's reception stats. to the 1990s. Like 1990, he was still had like I think 3 in the top 15 reception totals. And that's 2 decades after he retired. He was still one of the top reception totals for season guys. It's incredible, and people just dismiss him because he wasn't fast, and he didn't have these gaudy receiving yards numbers or yards after the catch. But so what? He wasn't fast, but he caught everything thrown his way. So there's a lot of arguments for it out there, but I can talk Hall of Fame all day long. And again, just if you, I'm trying to get more buzz about Tom Nalen. So if you see my video come out about his qualifications, repost it, or talk about it. Start up a conversation. Let's get Tom Nalen a little more buzz going for him. I'd really appreciate that. I would also appreciate you guys showing up at the meet and greet, Green Bay Packers game. It will be fun. Look for the big Mile High Huddle tent in the parking lot. We'll get more details out to you, but don't forget to do that as well. I love to meet you guys. I met a few of you folks when I was out there last year. So come by, say hello. We'll talk history if you want. We'll talk football or talk about anything. You can talk about movies. I love talking about movies too. So, anyway, definitely don't forget that. So Keith Brugman, thank you for this. I'm going to close up the show with this very nice quote. Thank you so much, Keith, saying another fantastic show, Thomas. Thank you. Well, thank you for being here, and thank you for the support that you've always given me. And it was really great to meet you out there at training camp. So thank you very much. And with that, I'm just going to say, I hope the Broncos can change around their fortunes and start winning again. But I'm just going to say thank you for being here, regardless of the Broncos being good or bad. I appreciate everyone that comes into this show and talks football, talks Broncos with me. So thank you very much. Have a wonderful day and a wonderful weekend, Broncos.